can go on, and it really is so important work that we have you representing the community, here in the community, and passing those on. It means so much. As many of you know, I am in Washington, D.C. quite a bit, which is why I rely on my staff so much. Let me start by introducing my district director, who runs the district all the time, Gabby Medina. And I have to give it up to Joe, who trained her, so thank you, Joe. And then my representative who handles the San Pedro area is Morgan Roth, who's also my deputy district director. We have Gabby Sid here, who covers the northern part of the district. I have two caseworkers, Patty Camacho and Tess. Is Tess here? She's outside doing check-in. And then I think we have some fill reps. I don't see them, but we have Mr. K.W. Toulis, who's just with me in the Compton Parade. I'm not sure if he's here yet. He covers the Compton, Watts, Carson area. And Francisco, our staff assistant, right here taking some photos. He answers your calls when you call into the district office. And then Kim runs some of our communications, all of our communications in the district. So I think we got everybody, even though I don't see everybody. Let me just first quickly tell you a little bit about what our office does. For those of you who are new, and there's quite a bit of people in this room that either got our call or heard from somebody about today. Let me just do a really quick rundown of some of what we do. My number one goal with constituent services is when you have a problem or an issue on your hand that you need, you call our office. Sometimes we call from people that say, hey, I have a pothole in my street, can you fix it? Generally, that's not a federal issue, but we have a pretty good relationship with our council member's office, our assembly member's office, our senator's office, and so then we can reach out to them and say, hey, can you help us on this? Is there something you can do? And that's something that I take great pride in, is having that strong relationship with our local elected officials, so that if we can't fix it, we can call and reach out to them. Sometimes the local electeds will say, what can you do on the federal level to help us bring in more funding to do some of these things? And we'll talk a little bit about those challenges right now, but certainly call our office if you have any immigration issues. That's a hot topic right now. You get a lot of calls for immigration issues. If you have need a status of your application, we have caseworkers who can be helpful. If we can help you, we can probably connect you with an organization that can be helpful. Veterans Affairs, we do a lot of stuff with VA benefits. This is something I take great pride in. Just recently, we had a veteran call and say, I need you on an emergency basis. I have to get my VA loan, and it's been held up. Can you do anything? The deadline is in like 4 days. And our caseworker was able to call and get it done. And so we take great pride in trying to make this stuff happen. Anything regarding Social Security, we get a lot of people call. Sometimes they're not receiving their full benefits. Sometimes they have a question. Sometimes they get a bill that says they owe a lot of money. And our caseworkers can actually inquire. And in many cases, we have been able to resolve some of their issues. We had somebody recently get a bill for like over $200,000. And as it turned out, when we did the inquiry, it was only $14,000. And so there are times where people call us in real disbelief and need help. And well, I wish I could say we help everybody or we could help everybody. Sometimes we can't. We will do what we can on that. So if you have any issues with the Department of Labor, you have issues, you want to apply for the military academies, we just put together a panel that will help review to do nominations for the military academies. Our office handles that as well. When you're watching what's happening in Washington and you want to provide input on legislation, on what's going on, that is also something you should call our office for. I could go on and on, but that's just to give you a little bit of flavor of what we do. What I want to do is I want to just go into a little bit about what's happening in Washington right now, and then what I'll do is I'll just take a couple of hands, but then I will let everybody ask, I'm gonna walk around as well, so I'll be available for questions. And please, if you wanna get up, because you gotta go to the bathroom, if you gotta eat, if you gotta leave, feel free. This is really, wasn't meant to be a formal, me talking at you. I kind of wanted more interaction. So let's start with the GOP tax plan. You probably have heard that recently the Senate voted on the tax plan and passed it. Now, we are, when I show up today, I show up in my capacity as a representative for everybody. Whether you're an independent, whether you're a Democrat, whether you're a Republican, but I have to tell you that this tax bill is going to hurt everybody, unless you're at the very top. So I have been a staunch opponent to this tax plan. I'm very concerned about what it's going to do, not just for people in the district, but for Californians in general. There has been discussions back and forth about whether they're going to leave in the deduction for the state and local tax deduction, which is otherwise referred to as SALT. If you itemize, you own property, generally you use this deduction, and the larger states like California, New Jersey, heavily rely upon it. And so even though this is being painted as a tax cut, it's going to be a tax increase because you will now have a larger tax liability. And there's also a lot of programs here that locally rely upon some of that tax funding that it's going to impact. So that's one of the areas we're watching very closely. There have been negotiating back and forth on whether they're going to allow the property tax deduction to be at $10,000 or nothing at all. If you own property here, as you know, I own property and rely upon it. If this goes away, you're going to be paying more in taxes. So just know that when you are hearing that it's a tax cut, guess what? There are other areas that are going to raise your taxes, and it's going to be a much bigger hit. There are other provisions of the bill that are currently under negotiation. Medical expense deductions. If you're a senior citizen, if you have a health condition, if you spend quite a bit of money on medical expenses and you deduct that, they're trying to eliminate that. So the House has voted to eliminate it. The Senate is trying to keep it in. Right now, the bill is in what's called conference. So people from the House and the Senate side, have been appointed to go into a room and try to work these out. Now, part of the problem is that certain senators were promised certain things for their vote. One example, something that I don't even know what it has to do with taxes, is opening up the Arctic to drilling. Right? That's what it took to include in the bill to get a senator to vote for it. The question is, does that survive? And if it survives, is that going to mean somebody's going to not vote for it? I would be completely honest with you. I think our best hope in stopping this is in the Senate, because we know they can only afford 2 defectors before the vice president has to come in and be the deciding vote, which obviously he will support. Right now we have one senator who we know is a no, which is Bob Corker. We just heard that Senator Collins out of Maine was promised to be able to keep the subsidy funding for the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, that she was fighting for and was promised she was going to get. But the House Republicans have just said, no, we're not going to give that to you. So if the final bill doesn't have it, she could vote no, but that still only gets us to 50. And they could still break that tie. So we are closely watching all the provisions. Know that as your representative, I am fighting to make sure low-income families are the one, and middle-class families are getting the benefit of a tax cut. Not the top 1%, not all the corporations. And let me tell you, there's a lot of small businesses that are against this tax plan. This is not just all businesses for it. And this is what people need to recognize. Small businesses have come out in droves and say, this is going to hurt us. And so there are a lot of provisions of it that are really going to have a profound impact. And this will be the start of the unraveling of the Affordable Care Act. Because once you take away the individual mandate, which requires people to get the health insurance, premiums are going to go up because now people at the younger ages who helped offset the cost is going to make that insurance go up. And then, unfortunately, this administration is going to use that as a tagline to say, this is why we've been fighting this, because it doesn't work. But in reality, what they're doing behind the scenes is really trying to implode it. So just know that I am fighting. We are talking with our colleagues. Unfortunately, they need a win, and they haven't had a win. And so they're trying to get something they can market and take back to their districts. So that's the latest on the GOP tax plan. We don't have a date on when it's going to come back for a vote, but the way this will work is it will come back to the House for a vote, and then it'll go back to the Senate for a vote. So it still has to come back twice. Now we are outnumbered in the House by more than we are in the Senate, which is why I tell you that the Senate side might have the better chance. So stay tuned. If you came today, hopefully you opted in to receive emails. We can keep you updated by email. Check our website as well. Call our office. So I will talk a little bit about the government shutdown and the year-end spending bill. These are some of the larger looming items that you're going to hear about. What is happening there? Well, there actually was a deadline on December the 8th for Congress to pass a year-end spending bill that would fund basically the government to keep it going. Now, unfortunately, what's been happening in recent times is Congress has been doing this year on and year at a time instead of passing a budget that's for years on end that would help everybody plan. So there was a deadline on December the 8th, and instead of fixing problems that had to be in the year-end deadline, and I'll give you an example. CHIP, does everybody know the Children's Health Improvement, the health insurance program? So that is something that has been a bipartisan effort across the aisle to support this program, but it's not right now. As a matter of fact, the House recently passed a bill on CHIP, but what they're doing is they're taking the money from seniors to put it into the children's insurance program. So we voted against it on our side of the aisle, the Democratic side of the aisle, because we're saying, look, you are robbing the Peter to pay Paul, right? You are taking it from one group who needs it and put it into another group, and you shouldn't be doing that. And so we are trying to make sure there's a renegotiation on CHIP in the year-end spending. That's one of them. You've probably heard that another big piece of year-end spending is going to be DACA. So let me tell you a little bit about DACA and the Dreamers. We have been fighting to get a clean dream bill. We have said time and time again, we shouldn't be tying DACA and the dream bill to any kind of year-end funding bill. It doesn't make any sense, they really don't go together, but unfortunately that's the only leverage we have. Because historically, Republicans have needed Democrats to pass year-end spending. They've actually never been able to do it on their own. So, this is where we have a little bit of leverage. Now, I wish I could tell you I had good news. Even though Democrats are pushing for a clean dream bill, I know that there's members of Congress, as we speak now, we call them the moderates, who are trying to negotiate a deal. What does that mean? Well, they're in a room and they're trying to figure out what are we willing to give up so that you'll give us the protections for the Dreamers. And so the one good news there is that there is bipartisan support to get protections for Dreamers. And just this week we had 32 Republicans, that's a lot in today's day and age, who wrote a letter to Speaker Ryan and they said, we want a DACA fix before the end of the year, before we leave here. And that's a pretty big step because the Speaker has been saying, we have until March. We'll deal with it when we can, even though people every day are losing their status and losing the ability to be here. And so we are fighting hard, and I feel very hopeful we are going to get this before the end of the year, but I can't tell you what it's going to cost. And when I say that is, there are a lot of Republicans who say, I'm all for it, but I need you to give me something to go back to my district. and they want a number of things. They range from anything from put more money into border security. There's some members who say they want more money into a border wall. There's some more members that say, I want more interior enforcement. You know there's more interior enforcement going on than there is at the border under this administration. There's been more people we call collaterals, which means you're not a target of ICE, but you're in the wrong place and they happen to see you and they see you don't have papers, so then they take you in. So there really is no priority for felons instead of families. And so it's very unfortunate. So we are following that. I'm part of the Hispanic Caucus in Washington, and we have been very clear. We're not leaving until there's a dream bill. We're not leaving until these protections are there. And so we have been standing firm, but I can't say that about everybody. And so if you generally follow sometimes, there's about 15 Democrats who are in what we call swing districts, where, you know, every now and again, they're voting with the Republicans, and sometimes we lose a little bit of that leverage. So we are holding firm on DACA. We have been. I will keep you updated as soon as I hear. We were supposed to be let out of session on December 14th. That's not happening anymore because they feel this is going to go on. So now I've been called back to Washington on the week of December 18th. So we will be there as long as it takes. And hopefully they let us out before Christmas Eve so we can get back to our families. So that is kind of the latest update on the year-end spending bill. Just so everybody knows, year-end spending, the Republicans want to keep it where it is. Democrats say, look, if you're going to put more money into defense spending, then you should put more, the same equivalent money into domestic spending, like education and roads and infrastructure. So that is an ongoing fight as well. And so everybody knows that the only way that things get funded is they're going to have to increase the debt ceiling, because we're spending so much money on increased defense budgets that we have to. They're beyond the caps. They're beyond the caps and the limits that Congress set. And with this tax plan, we're looking at another, what is it, $1.5 trillion of more debt. And look, this is no secret that Republicans have said when they're done with the tax plan, the way they're going to go find that money is Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. And they haven't been shy about it. I am ashamed when I talk to my colleagues and I hear that. Because of these very programs that people in our communities and across the country really rely upon are going to be under attack soon. So it is a very bleak picture that I paint. Know that I am working hard. And what does that mean? Well, I'm a freshman member of Congress, right? I just got elected in November of last year. I serve as the president of the freshman class. Thank you. I serve as president of the freshman class. So through that, I get to know the freshmen across the aisle as well. Look at folks, we have to work with Republicans because we can't do anything without them. So I do a lot of bipartisan events. As a matter of fact, I just spent 8 days during Thanksgiving on a Republican trip going overseas to visit the men and women who serve overseas and spend my Thanksgiving in Kandahar, Afghanistan, serving with the California National Guard, who is at the front line. And whether you agree whether we should put more money into military spending or not, these are the men and women on the front lines that are serving our country. And so you have to go. And it was a funny kind of to see when I got there. There's a lot of young people who they look at me and they're like, you're a member of Congress? Can we take selfies together? And so I thought that was really neat. And the general from the California National Guard, the 40th Brigade, is actually a San Pedro resident. And I thought that was really neat. General Lathrop. And I said to him, General, let me know if there's anything I could do for you. And he said, there's one thing I would like you to do. And I said, what is that? He goes, will you email my wife and tell her that you spent Thanksgiving with me? And send her a photo of us. And he said that he once asked an elected official to do that, and that person never followed through. So when I got home, that's the one thing I sat down to do, and I thought it was so neat. She replied back, and we'll be visiting Washington soon. So know that we have so many great men and women who sacrifice their families and their lives to go overseas and be on the front lines. So I think I'm going to stop talking. I really could go on about legislation we've introduced. Just so you know, we had recently a hearing at the Port of LA on Homeland Security. I sit on Homeland Security and I sit on Natural Resources. We have been fighting to get more money to go to port security, and even though the House authorized $100 million for it, I just heard that last week the Senate cut that amount in half. So talk about looking at the funding and what's happening. It is a time where we have to pay attention on what is happening. And know that I have my staff and myself who is looking over every dollar to see what is going on. I mean, they're cutting funding to homeless programs on the federal level. Yet we see locally the explosion and the need and the reliance upon the federal funds so that some of these local measures that we pass can actually work. And so when I saw the report this week that the West Coast is leading the way on homelessness, I said, well, that's the problem. Part of the problem is that you don't have members in Washington who are on the West Side will just say, well, it's not my problem. Or they don't want to put their money there. And it is really a human rights issue that we need to remain focused on. So I would just ask that if you want to know more about some of the legislation, reach out to me. Certainly you can get it on our website. We have a bill that will help port truck drivers who are unfairly being classified. We have a bill, a very simple bill, that if you get housing vouchers in cities where they don't use them, they go and use, they just reallocate them to the cities that need them, that have the highest rate of homelessness. It's not going to cost anything, and it's amazing how difficult it is to get bipartisan support on that. Just so that our veterans who are taken care of when they come home and don't end up on the street. So we've introduced a number of measures, and I won't go through all of them. We also have some boards around on some of the stuff we've done on environmental justice, which is always an ongoing issue, and a lot of different things. So why don't I stop talking, because I feel like I'm talking at you, and why don't I take a couple questions, and then we'll wrap up the talking portion, and then I will stick around for questions. I'm not going anywhere. So I saw one question in the back, and then I saw one here, and then I saw one over there. So we'll go 1, 2, 3, and then if there's any upstairs, we'll take 2 from upstairs, and then we'll close it so that. And I'm not going anywhere, so you can feel free to come up and ask questions. So, all right. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Rudy Caceres, and there was a report from the National Alliance of Mental Illness recently detailing how bad mental health parity is as compared to other health care. And the real problem is that mental health care is seen as more of a behavioral issue, seen as those deviants, those psychos, those crazies. So you're not treated with the same respect as other people with physical disabilities. And one of the things that I want to stress, it's not so much the access to hospital beds or to psychiatric medications. One big thing that's majorly lacking is access to talk therapy and peer support, because even with the VA insurance, which I have at 100% disability, is that I'm lucky to just get maybe 8 sessions with therapists and expect it to be all better. So it's treated more like a luxury than something that is essential to having someone be able to thrive in their community. And another one is peer support from other people with lived experience. There's not enough of that. There's not even national certification, standardization, even though it exists.
I'm a firm believer. I even have mental health issues. I think all of us do. We all deal with stresses in our life. We all have mental health issues in the world that we live in. That's the nature of it. But know that this is one of my issues that I care very deeply about. And it's something that, one of the reasons that I think that the ACA, we need to keep fighting for the ACA. And let me tell you, I'm going to be the first to tell you that the Affordable Care Act has some problems, and we need to go back and fix those problems. So the objective has been to fight to keep it, but then going back and fixing it, and eventually getting to a system where there is really Medicare for all, and everybody has access to health care. So thank you for bringing up the mental health issues, and we'll be working on that. And you know, in Congress, I love it when my Republican counterparts say, oh, I want to work with you on this. And when you sit down with them, they want to do it, but they don't want to put any money into it. And so, well, how's it going to get done? You know, things cost money, and so we certainly have run across, you know, that hurdle. But thank you, sir. Rio Beach. And I'm looking over the corner over there because they say our council member, who I'm going to be following up with after I meet with the constituent on this issue. So somebody on my staff will get your information so that we can work with you on this, and then we can work with our council member's office on this issue. So thank you for bringing that up.
One other quick thing is I'm concerned about the use of pesticides and herbicides in San Pedro. I've got a little wildlife and migratory birds, and I don't really know how the extent to which it's used, but I'm not concerned about that.
Okay, so the second issue is talking about some of the pesticides that are used here in Pedro, and somebody on my staff can get your information so we can figure out where you live and where your concern is. Environmental justice and environmental issues is one of my top priorities. In Washington, there's quite a bit of rollback on all of the environmental protections, and they're trying to cut the EPA budget by 33%. By the way, the EPA in San Francisco is under threat to be closed right now. That's the agency that oversees all the air pollution in the state of California. So know that that's part of the fight right now, is preserving what we have. You know, when I was a candidate, I said I was going to go to Washington to try to improve the air quality, and right now it's sometimes trying to save where we are, the status quo, because we're seeing the rollbacks. They're also weakening a lot of the regulations, which is going to make it harder to enforce things like making sure the pesticides that are not supposed to be used are enforced. So we'll follow up with you, sir, to see if we can figure out where you are and get an answer for you and more information. Okay. Well, sir, you're going to have to talk to my staff for the third one. We want to move. Okay, Beverly?
Yeah, I just want to say how upset I am that Democrats will always say there's not enough money, and yet I think all the Democrats voted to give Trump much more than he even asked for the defense budget. We already have enough weapons to wipe out the world 10 times over, and yet the Democrats voted to give him more, and I really don't understand why. They're looking for money. Why don't they cut the budget and stop some of these wars and close some of these bases?
So I actually am one of the Democrats that voted against that NDAA, which was increasing the defense spending. But it's you know, everybody has a district that they go home to and a district that they answer to, and the best I can tell you is what I did. I am a firm believer in making sure that we're using the money efficiently, and I do think it's interesting that you did have a request that was the Pentagon didn't even ask for as much money as was given. So they went above and beyond what the Pentagon was given.
I just want to say that our Senator Kamala Harris voted.
Yeah, I won't talk about this. All right. So we did say we were going to take two questions up at the top. Okay, sir.
Yes, actually, this is a two-part.
Okay.
First of all, economics. We talk about tax cuts, all of this stuff. I have yet to hear, except for one guy that ran for president 8 years ago, Ron Paul, anyone mention the fact that we're paying a private bank interest on money that, as a sovereign function of government of a sovereign nation, we can actually print that money interest-free and spend it as a credit instead of a debit into society. And if there's any question about that, that's what the kings and queens of Europe did for years. We don't need a central bank. That's one of the reasons we have the economic problems we have. What we need to do is get rid of the Federal Reserve and return control of money to Congress. No one talks about that, Republican or Democrat. That's number one. There's also another way to run money. It's called social credit. Anybody here, get on the internet, Google C.H. Douglas and social credit. It's a perfect answer to all of it. Number two, foreign policy. I have a son who's in the Air Force right now. He's actually stationed overseas. He's pretty safe, but I worry about him. I don't want to see World War III happen over Russia. I keep hearing about Russia. To me, Putin's more like one of the old czars. I think we should be allied to Russia instead of against them. The problem is this country right now recognizes Jerusalem. The people who run this country are not the Russians. I think everyone in this room knows who they are, but no one wants to mention the name. That's the problem. You need to pledge allegiance to America, not Israel.
Sir, where does your son serve?
My what?
Where does your son serve?
He's in Jordan right now.
In Jordan. Well, thank you so much for your service and your son's service to this country. It's a great sacrifice that our men and women overseas do. I'd be happy to chat with you more offline about the need for the need to give the bank back to Congress. I'll be honest with you, I've only been there for about a year, and I'm not sure what I would be giving to Congress right now the way they are getting things done. And I have to say, I shared a similar concern on foreign policy and the concern of whether there's going to be a third world war. Frankly, I sit on Homeland Security, and one of my committees, one of the things I get to do is we have different experts come before us. And I had come before Homeland. We were having a hearing on nuclear weapons and nuclear war. And what was really fascinating is I had an expert come in, and I said, do you think it helps diplomacy in this country to stay at war when you have the president tweeting at the North Korean leader and offending him and prompting him? And the guy responded and he said he didn't think there was a problem with that. I have to tell you, in Congress, across the aisle, on both sides of the aisle, there are members who are genuinely concerned about going into another nuclear war. This is not a game of chicken where you put people's lives on the line. I was recently in South Korea, where we have troops there, and where the South Korean people, they live every day wondering if it's the last day. And I mean, we just saw this heroic escape from a North Korean soldier just within the last couple of weeks. And so when I was down there, got to talk to a defector who said, look, this is not somebody you want to play around with. This is not somebody that you want to play chicken with and you want to challenge. And so I think in the interest of all our men and women, wherever they're serving, is that we need to have leadership that's going to take diplomacy seriously, that's going to look at every resort before they look at war. And unfortunately, we just haven't had that. And we have heard that across the board. This is not a Democratic talking point. You can look at members of Congress on the other side of the aisle who have talked about this very concern and say this is not the way to show leadership and diplomatic leadership. So I share the concern that we have on the foreign policy concerns that we have, and really feel that we do need a little bit better leadership, to say the least. Second question up from the top. Yes, sir.
Congresswoman, thank you for having this. This is very enjoyable. My concern is about the Democrats and their ability to give their messages to people. In my opinion, Democrats represent most of America, but it seems like the Republicans are able to convince people that they represent better. So, are the Democrats going to get better at that game?
So, it's a very good question. Here's the reality. The media gives a lot of voice to politicians. And the media covers Donald Trump left and right every day, all the time. So his messaging is what is governing on what we're hearing on the airwaves. And what's fascinating is the guy lies, and then people believe it. And you know, we just heard last week all of a sudden question the authenticity of the Access Hollywood tape. When even though last year he pretty much agreed that it was real. It's amazing. Just last night he held a rally and he said it was a packed room, and we saw the photos. It wasn't packed. And those are the little lies. Imagine on the really important lies, right? So there is no doubt that there has to be better messaging. It has been difficult in Washington to get a win that we can message to communities. And I think you've seen an energized face right now of people who are coming out. I mean, look at what just happened in Virginia, where they had elections and they really took over the state house and they swept a lot of elections. And the reality is that it takes a lot of people. It takes people to come out. It takes people to have their voices heard. It takes people to get engaged. Look, when you hear of an issue that you don't like, don't say, oh, my congresswoman's already with me. I'm not going to do anything on that because I know she's already voting the right way. You need to pick up the phone. If you have family members in other parts of the country, have them call their members. Write a letter to the editor. Call a media outlet. It really is the power of our voice together that creates change. Because if you think about healthcare, it wasn't just coming out of red areas. This was coming out of across the country, and that's really what helped us save healthcare the first time around. The first day of Congress, the Republicans wanted to cut the ethics office. Just gut it. What do we need ethics for? Right? As in today's day and age, we know why we need ethics. And what happened? Public outcry. People started to get on social media and they started saying this was ridiculous and insane and we couldn't let this happen. And guess what? They took the bill off the floor. Now let me tell you really quickly, I haven't mentioned this, a bill that just got passed this week in the House. Concealed carry. Have you heard about this? Basically, in California, you cannot carry a concealed firearm. This law, if it passes the Senate, would say you can go to Texas and you can get a concealed carry permit, and now you can take that concealed carry anywhere in the 50 states. It really takes away the power of the states to set the rules on what they want. But anyhow, I digress because I bring that up because, you know, this was supposed to go to a vote 3 other times. It was supposed to go to a vote before the Republican baseball shooting, and they took it off for a vote because they thought it was bad timing. True story. And then it was supposed to go to a vote right before the Las Vegas shooting happened, and they took it off the floor as well because they thought it was bad timing as well. So go figure. I mean, if you're ashamed to put it to a vote then, there's something wrong with the bill. So I will take your message back to Washington, and I certainly will. We've been trying to message a little more on that we have a better deal, that we have, you know, better skills, better wages, better jobs is going to get you a better deal. When you hear about the GOP tax plan, generally you hear Democrats say, we have a better deal, we have a different idea of what we want, and that is going to be things like lowering taxes actually for the middle class, not increasing them. So you are absolutely right that the message needs to get better, but we also need the help of people to get the message out as well. So, okay, I'm going to take one more question, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to just end the speaking portion, although I'm not going to leave. So now I'm going to get a woman because we've been lacking on women, and I've seen the hands in the very far back of the room over there, and there's a very aggressive, persistent woman who I happen to know, and let me tell you, the word persistent has been something that's been used to describe me too. So I'm going to go ahead and call on you. So she brought up the tax plan and trying to highlight the threat there is to higher education and the tax plan. And you're absolutely right. There are a few things in higher education. One is the student loan deduction, but she raised the endowment. There will be a penalty on universities now for endowments. Now, what's really interesting is if you look at the Senate plan, you know, right before the middle of the night, and they were scribbling on their plan to like make exceptions to get members to vote, they actually carved out an exception for one college. One college, a Christian conservative college called Hillsdale College, who won't be impacted by this new rule. Now talk about carving out exceptions for votes. That is an indication of what is happening to get the votes to pass this thing, and it's been horrific. Now, I'm gonna take one more question. This is really the last question. Go ahead.
I'm just wondering, it seems to me that all of this really started with Citizens United. Is there any action to try and undo that so that whoever has the most money can make the most lies in the media and win the election?
So she says that she thought this started happening when Citizens United was ruled upon. Actually, that's not real accurate. It was happening before. You still had money in politics as a problem overall. Okay, I mean, generally speaking, I have been in a room with a bunch of Republican freshmen and I've been like, there's gotta be something we can work on together. Now, I had a guy come up to me and say, I wanna work on campaign finance reform with you. And I said, really? Are you a Democrat or a Republican? He goes, I'm a Republican. And he says, but I can't work on it with you now. I said, why is that? He goes, because I'm afraid I'm gonna be challenged primary in my re-election campaign. So why don't we get together in February of next year, which is this coming February, and we'll work on a bill together. And I just saw him last week in the House, and I said, I got that date on my calendar, and he says, I'm ready to work with you. Now, what he probably wants to do is not gonna be enough of what we want, but I wanna sit down and see what he wants to do. My understanding is he wants to disclose donors into some of these super PACs, which right now isn't done. But look, at money in politics is generally a problem overall. I'd be the first to tell you, look, when I ran for Congress, I almost didn't run for Congress because it's so hard to raise money to run for Congress. You know, and frankly, it costs a minimum of $1 million or $2 million just to run. You know, look, I'm the youngest of 11 kids from an immigrant family from Mexico. You know, my mom she had a 3rd grade education. Now, I'm lucky. I went to UCLA undergrad. I went to USC Law School. I became a lawyer. You know, I beat the odds. But even then, I'm like, who am I going to call? I don't have rich family members, right? It's very discouraging, and it's hard. And sometimes candidates call me and they say, Nanette, I'm going to run for something. You inspired me to run. And one of the very first questions I asked them is, how much money can you raise? And they don't like to hear that. And they say, well, Nanette, I'm going to have the people like you did. And I say, it's not just that. You need money to tell people who you are and what you're going to do for them. And that is the reality of Congress. Let me tell you, you see the 60 Minutes video, report that shows members of Congress going from the U.S. Capitol over to the DCCC to call to raise money? That is the political reality I live in. I have to decide how much time I'm going to spend on policy work and how much time I'm going to spend on the other side so that I could get reelected, so that I could keep fighting for you. And let me tell you, folks, that is not easy to do. When I first got there, people said, you're not spending enough time across the street. And I said, look, it's really difficult because right now we need somebody fighting for our communities on these policy issues. But it's the reality that we live in, and it's not easy. Now, I don't take money from oil companies, tobacco companies, but it is not easy. And campaign finance reform is something I would love to see. I think you would see more qualified people running. I think you would see a change in tune in Washington and across the board. But let me also be very real with you. It's not an issue that people are acting on. You're going to hear a lot of people tell you they're for it, sure, but they're not acting on it. And I'm going to share a story with you, a behind-the-scenes story with you that I think is really just kind of to show you. I was in a Democratic lunch meeting, and a member of Congress said, hey, are you signing on to the single-payer health care bill? It's a terrible bill. Oh, this thing is so crazy. Those people on the left. This was a Democrat. And one of the members said, oh no way, I'm not signing on to that, that's just so bad. And now I signed on to the bill, okay? So I'm just sitting there and I'm listening. I'm sitting there listening, and then that same person says, oh, I signed on for the bill. And I turned to him and I said, you signed on for the bill? You just said it was a terrible bill. And he said, I know it's not going anywhere. I'm not going to upset the left. Why would I not sign on to the bill? This is what happens. This is the reality. You see some people everywhere talking about impeachment. Ask yourself, are those members on impeachment articles? You need to do a little more digging sometimes and go beyond just the rhetoric. Now, since I brought it up last week, there was a vote in Congress on whether to allow impeachment debate to continue. I was in the minority. The Democratic leadership asked us to vote against it. They wanted us to vote yes to table debate on impeachment. I voted no. I was one of 53 Democrats, but let me tell you why. Not because the articles that were put forth were the best articles there could have been, because there was no mention of obstruction of justice, and there was no mention of the emoluments clause, and the violation of the emoluments clause, which I think are the two strongest arguments. But I did it because I think there should be, at minimum, a debate, and we could add those in later. And some people say we got to be patient. I agree. I understand the patience argument. Look, there's a special prosecutor who right now is on the tail of this president and on what's going on in this investigation. And frankly, we can't do it alone. We're going to need some Republicans to say, we're with you on this. And that is not going to happen unless a special prosecutor comes back with something we can use. So also the political reality there is, that's not going anywhere until we see more and until we have folks on the other side willing to do something about it. But I felt that that was a very important vote because it was at least willing to show whether you wanted to have the conversation or you didn't want to have the conversation. Now, there are some people who voted to table it, but think it's the wrong time. Everybody has their own explanation. I'm accountable to you, and I'm telling you why I voted that way.
Do you think 2018 will be
So,
a referendum on impeachment?
Do I think 2018 will be a referendum on impeachment? I don't know. Honestly, look, California is nothing like the rest of this country. It is nothing like, we didn't like this guy. Right? So for me to be able to say, yeah, no, I have to wrap up. I'm talking too much. So for me to be able to say what it's going to be, I don't know. All I can tell you is the power is in the power really is in the voters across the country. And you need to have your voice heard. And I'll be the first to tell you, look, you may not agree with everything I do. You may agree with some of it. Maybe you agree with none of it. Right? Your power is in your vote on who you want fighting for you, who you want. And, you know, I may do things you're not going to like, and I welcome you to come into my office and share your side. And so I am doing the best I can under the circumstances I have, and I hope to have the honor to keep representing this district, which stretches all the way from San Pedro and Wilmington and Carson and Compton and Watts and to Southgate. It's a big district. So you all have been absolutely excellent in sitting here and listening. I was expecting half of you to leave after you got fed. But really, thank you so very much. And thank you for the patience and the fact that I'm not here that much. And really, I invite you to reach out to my staff and let us know how we can be helpful, how we can be of service. That's what I am here for. And for those of you who may not know, I'm your neighbor. I am a resident right here in San Pedro. I live on 25th and Cabrillo. My family's been here for 40 years. My sister used to work at the Lucky's on 25th and Western for 35 years until Higgins took over and shut it down. So, you know, I'm here, my door's open, and thank you all so much for your patience today. Let me also just thank the entire staff and everybody who's the workers here who helped make this happen. A beautiful venue. Thank you all so very much.